As many of you know, this week Defense Secretary Leon Panetta made it official. After 200 years, American women no longer banned from serving in combat. Thousands of jobs historically off limits to women will now be up for grabs. Jobs like parajumpers, leaping from airplanes and infiltrating enemy lines to rescue stranded Air Force colleagues. That has never been allowed before. But to fight alongside men, women will have to pass the same physically grueling tests. Police Special Forces, like the Navy SEALs, they need to swim the length of 5 football fields in 12.5 minutes, do 50 push-ups, 50 curl-ups, and 10 pull-ups in 6 minutes total. That's followed by a 1.5-mile run in 10 minutes or less. Studies have shown women can outperform men when it comes to endurance. But will they have the upper body strength needed to lift and load a 50-pound shell into a tank gun? Women already make up 15% of the 1.5 million active duty military personnel. Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth, she was a helicopter pilot who lost both her legs serving in Iraq.
America's daughters are just as capable of defending liberty and freedom as her sons are.
Women serve in combat roles around the world, but they make up just a small fraction of combat soldiers. In Israel, it's just 3%. But some former officers say women will have to prove they have the physical strength to serve on the front lines.
The combat roles, that has to be addressed, whether the standards are going to be separate, because those that enter the infantry or special operations units, standards are very high, and they're high for a reason.
So many women have lost their lives already, 152 in the line of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan alone. But now it's the actual front line that will be wide open. And for more, we're now very pleased to be joined by Sergeant Perri Williams. She served with the U.S. Navy in Iraq and Japan, and we're very pleased to welcome her to the program. You know, what surprised me most of all was the lack of surprise for a lot of folks when this decision was announced. Were you surprised by the reaction from both military and the general public that they basically shrugged their shoulders and said, yeah, we're kind of doing it now already?
For the most part, I wasn't, because there's been women in combat for so many years already that it was really just a stamp on a piece of paper saying it was okay.
Explain to people at home who say, oh my God, this is, how can we do this? You can't have women on the front lines. Explain to them the realities of the military today. The front lines are kind of a movable place, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's been medics, there's been military policemen, there's helo pilots. You know, the women in combat, we've already been there for so long, and saying now that, you know, with new jobs that enter in and all that stuff, I think it's just, like I said, a stamp on a piece of paper. And sure, there'll be, you know, standards that we have to keep to get into those positions, but I don't think it'll really change anything. There's plenty of women out there right now that have been able to do it, and more to come that will be able to do it.
We'll talk about those physical demands, Sergeant, because you're talking about obviously lugging some heavy equipment here in, you know, obviously really hot locations or in difficult situations. How many women do you think could handle some of the physical demands that this calls on? Are there a small percentage, or do you think more than the general public thinks?
I think there's more than the public thinks, but it's still a pretty small percentage. I do know a lot. I have a lot of friends on active duty still that can carry the same amount, if not more, than, you know, some guys could. They're talking about being able to carry 200 pounds, a 200-pound man, and all this stuff. But there's already, you know, female firefighters and female military policemen and all that stuff that are able to do that. And they train us already to, you know, to carry rucksacks full of, you know, varying weight and all that stuff, that we can already do that.
You know, I said off the top, Sergeant, most people, they didn't bat an eye with this decision, but there have been critics, and I'm sure you've heard some of what they said, the concerns, not just in the military cohesion, but they talk about, you know, the issue of that you got both sexes near the front lines, and everything from the nudity here to the hygiene to the issue of you already have high incidence of sexual assault right now, sex, etc. That's going to, they say, only mess up an already difficult situation. How do you respond to those concerns?
I think as far as like sexual assault and all that goes, that's already pretty, as big as it is, it does happen.
How do you think the American public would react if, I mean, POWs are always a huge issue here, but whether it's fair or not, the general public's going to react a lot differently if they see somebody's son that's a prisoner versus somebody's daughter. You think the American public's equipped to see not only women coming back in body bags, but also prisoners of war, etc.?
Probably not, but I mean, it takes a little time. I'm sure America wasn't ready to see anyone come back in a body bag, but it's going to happen. So I think eventually they'll probably get used to it.
Sergeant Williams, I really appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rich.
What do you think?
Well, it's a big social experiment. It's a big day, and how it plays out, we don't know. If the Army, the military maintains the standards, then it could succeed. But I've lived through this. I'm an infantryman, and I know how grimy and grubby and nasty it can be, and it's hard. So the interview illustrated that some women can carry the weight, can go over the walls, but many, many can't, and many don't want to. And then you have to do a cost-benefit analysis of the 1 or 2 in a battalion of 1,000. Does that make sense?
But do you think the standards that are specific, right? They're not gray, it's black or white, either you can or you can't do it. Are that sufficient enough to your satisfaction that there's a threshold that you either can or can't do to be on the front line?
A lot of people don't understand that currently there are 2 standards. There's women's PT, physical fitness, and male physical fitness. So what they would have to do is create a standard for the combat arms that is the same and not reduce a standard. That's never been done before. So women currently have a lower push-up, sit-up, run standard than men do currently. If we go to this, that means we have to really hold people accountable to those standards. What I've seen before in the past, I came into West Point in the early 80s when women were new to West Point. And you could see how standards could be put at risk. I've seen that in real life. So it's very important. If we can maintain standards, this may be a successful experiment, but I don't know.
All right, thank you very much. We take a quick break. When we come back, we will go around the table and each of our guests will get a chance to sound off an issue that's important to them. Stay with us. We'll be right back.